History of Old World, Part 2, as told by me, the Venerable Hieronymous of Nuln. Of the lands of Araby, south of Tylea, past the stormy seas of the Black Gulf, lies the kingdom of Araby. Here the decadent caliphs and sultans rule cities made of white stone. In their realms are the vast deserts, oases that glitter like jewels, and mountains inhabited by fierce nomad warriors. Several great cities form a loose coalition, though in effect they are all independent states with their own rulers, traditions, and customs. The sheiks, emirs, and sultans of Kofur, Lashik and Martek, live in unimaginable luxury, served by hundreds of slaves who will fulfill their every whim. Their harems are filled with voluptuous beauties from across the world, and their treasure chambers with all the splendor and wealth of that distant land. Some of the despots are cruel by their nature, ordering beheadings and mutilation of even the pettiest criminals, whilst others are great rulers and patrons of arts and science. In contrast, the nomadic peoples who are the subjects of the Arabian rulers do not build permanent settlements, preferring to travel far and wide in the desert. Some ride not upon horses, but on strange and most bad-tempered beasts, which never thirst, and appear never to drink. There are many sorcerers in Araby who can perform strange works of magic. It is said that they can conjure up spirits which they call genies, and imprison them in glass bottles. When the bottle is uncorked, the spirit emerges as a vapour and grows to immense size to do the bidding of his master. Other tales speak of wizards who fly high above the sands on carpets. Believe this, if you will. In the old world, the Arabians are known to be cunning traders and merchants. It is said that an Arabian can trick even a Tylean into a bad bargain, and I know few more crooked traders than the Tyleans. The most infamous of the Arabians are the merciless pirates of Kofir. The ships of the old world fear few perils of the sea as much as the corsairs of Araby. The port of Kofir holds many sleek and deadly ships which prey the seven seas. Of the Southlands. Of the hot jungles of the south I can say little, for few have dared the stormy seas of the south, and even fewer have returned from this dark continent. The Southlands encompass vast, untouched jungles and snow-capped mountains. The western coast hosts a number of small colonies and Arabian ports. These serve as havens for their ships. The jungles themselves are said to be impenetrable and trackless, filled with all manner of dangerous animals and monsters. All attempts to explore this hostile, steaming hell have failed. The few survivors talk of the last of the great dwarf strongholds, surrounded by savage orcs and goblins, and all manner of other monsters. Other tales speak of a great high elf fortress, which guards the tip of the Southlands, and the way to the distant east, and the lands of Ind and Cathay. But whatever power holds the Southlands, it is welcome to keep it. And they can also keep their dark treasures and cursed secrets. Of the distant kingdom of Cathay. past the World's Edge Mountains, and across the great Skull Lands, on the other side of the Mountains of Morn and the vast steppes, begin the uncharted lands. Only a single path travels to the east, known as the Silk Road. It runs through the untamed steppes until its destination, the fabled kingdom of Cathay. The lure of the Silk Road is great to the merchant houses of the Tylea and the burgomeisters of the empire, as well as the traders of Araby. But the road is far from safe. Roving bandits, steppe nomads, and the vast hosts of Hobgoblin Khan who rule the steppes are an ever-present threat, and one that cannot be taken too lightly. Only one caravan out of 10 makes the trip safely. The travellers that return from Cathay tell tales of great golden pagodas and the inexhaustible armies of the eastern despots. They bring exotic spices and finest silks, gleaming gold, luxurious porcelain, vases, and all manner of strange and wonderful items from the kingdom of the dragon. Glimpses of the mysterious glory of the distant and rich Orient. They also bring tales of jade cities and high temples where mystics probe the movement of the heavenly bodies and the positions of the stars, and scholars inscribe every word ever uttered by their strange and divine emperor. Many strange creatures are said to live in the land of Cathay, from serpentine dragons to gigantic living stone dogs, which guard the temples of the multitudinous gods of Cathay. Records of travellers tell of the thousand foot soldiers of the emperor, the mystic brotherhood of monks who can kill you with a touch of their hand, and the strange monkey warriors living high in the mountains of heaven. Most of these tales are highly fanciful, but certainly the empire of the celestial dragon must be a wondrous and rich place. But until the trade routes to the east are safe, it will remain a land of legend. East of Araby lies the land of the dead, a great desert, and amongst the dunes the necropolises, tomb cities, which are said to be the home of the unquiet dead. In that dread desert, beneath the moon's pale gaze, dead men are said to walk. They haunt the dunes and the ruined pyramids in the breathless, windless night. It is told in my most obscure and ancient scrolls that the great necromancer himself, Nagash the Black, ruled here long, long ago, and the land still bears the scars of his clawed hand. Here stand the great pyramids, built to be the tombs of the past kings of Nekhara. These ancient tombs are said to hold untold riches, and yet only few travel to this most desolate of places, to face the dangers of the ancient necropoli. Entire armies, commanded by their mummified kings, march under the scorching sun to wage war against the living and each other. My source of these ancient and evil things is the blasphemous tome known as the Liber Mortis, the Book of the Dead, which rests at my desk, bound as it is by the prayers of the grand Theogonist and the wards of the light wizards. I know it cannot corrupt me, yet I still fear and dare not do more than glimpse at its cursed pages, where long dead faces leer back at me. I can barely bring myself to touch the human-skinned covers, or the pages where the rites of necromancy and the spells of blood magic are written by the hand of the great necromancer. For this book comes from the land of Sylvania, and it once belonged to the foul Vlad von Carstein, the most infamous of all the vampire counts, who was defeated by the holy grand theogonist Wilhelm at the siege of Altdorf. Of dwarves. Dwarves are an ancient race, wide of girth, strong of arm, and stubborn of mind. Unless killed in battle, a dwarf can live to a very great age, as long as 400 years, though the dwarves claim that some of their runesmiths have lived considerably longer. I can scarcely believe these tales, even though it is not within a dwarf's nature to lie. The mighty World's Edge Mountains have been their home since time immemorial. Once, a long time ago, mighty dwarf strongholds formed an unbroken chain along the mountain range. Great were the hills and vaults hewn out of the mountains, and great was the clamour of dwarf hammering and song-singing echoing in the depths. Now, alas, many of these once great holds resound only to the scampering feet of the goblins. Dwarves are the greatest smiths and craftsmen in the world. Not even elven smiths can match the skill and care of the dwarves. It was the dwarves who in the days past forged the rune fangs, the 12 swords of the Empire, as a payment for Sigmar's help against the orcs. Today they are symbols of office and authority of the Elector Counts of the Empire. Dwarves are as strong and unbending as stone, and some would say forgiving, and as grim as the mountains they live in. From Karaz-a-Karak to the most ancient of the dwarf holds, the last high king of the dwarves wages a never-ending war against orcs, goblins, and other evil creatures. Each year dwarf numbers dwindle. Each year the war becomes more desperate. Each year the enemies of the dwarves become more numerous. In my mind, the wisdom of containing this struggle is doubtful, even if its heroism is not. But as long as one of the warriors draws breath, the dwarves will not set aside their axes or forget their grudges. In my youth, I travelled to Karaz-a-Karak, the seat of the dwarf high kings, to study their law. For 7 years I stood behind the door of the Hall of Remembrance to prove my dedication to learn the dwarf law. Finally, the locked doors were opened for me, and even then the dwarf lawmasters were reluctant to part with their knowledge, and only taught me because of the long-standing friendship between the emperors and the dwarf kings. I studied the great Book of Grudges and the Book of Remembrance, where the history of the dwarf race is recorded in the rune script, and the annals of the kings are kept, and with each passing day recorded in meticulous detail by dozens of dwarf scribes. The Book of Remembrance claims that during the ancient times the mighty dwarf empires stretched across the entire World's Edge Mountains, from the lands of Nausicaa in the north to the distant southlands encompassing dozens of dwarf holds. But those days are now long gone. Only a memory recited in sagas sung in the few dwarf halls that still survive. For long before the time of Sigmar, there was a war in the old world. Dwarf fought elf, and elf fought dwarf. It seems that for an entire age the slaughter continued, and many great battles were fought where both races suffered terribly. The war finally ended when the dwarf high king defeated the phoenix king in single battle, and the elves retreated from the old world. Huge earthquakes and volcanic eruptions shattered the vaults and chambers of the dwarf holds and broke the power of the dwarf empire for all time. Evil creatures from below the bowels of the earth then emerged to challenge the dwarf supremacy of the mountains and cast them into the precipice of extinction, where now they fight. Of the elves. Elves are an ancient, fey, and rare folk. Some scholars believe that the elves are immortal, but I believe that it is the cruel fate of all living creatures and things to perish, and even these fey creatures die as time passes. But the elves do live for a very long time indeed. Some of their lords have lived for 2 millennia, although I hazard a guess that the lifespan of an elf warrior be until he is slain in battle, which will often be sooner than his natural death. Can it therefore be any wonder that the elf wears upon his face such a sorrowful countenance and speaks much of fate and doom? Physically, elves are tall, slender, and elegant creatures with aesthetically beautiful features. Their flowing hair is as fine as flax, their movements are graceful, and their speed is inhuman. To the eyes of a man, the elves appear radiantly beautiful, but the wise should not let appearances fool them, for the elves are quick to anger and slow to appease. A mortal man who might by chance cast his eye upon an elf maid would think her to be a goddess, and would be incapable of any thought but her for the rest of the day. The wise do not judge elves by their divine appearance alone, but shun these fey and strange creatures, for beneath the beautiful exterior lies an enigmatic and mystic psyche. The minds of the elves are every bit as quick and agile as their bodies, but at the same time they are inhuman and strange, their mentality completely alien to that of a man. They can concentrate on a single task with terrifying intensity. An elf can quickly master any skill and far surpasses humans in song, writing, magic, alchemy, architecture, or any other fine art. Elves call themselves the first speakers, and it is true that their gifts of song and speech surpass by far any of the mannish races, even me. But such mental discipline comes at a price. Elves can lose track of time and the affairs of the world around them, foregoing rest and nourishment. Indeed, an elf may lose himself for weeks, staring intently at a beautiful sculpture or painting, uncaring of the flow of time or events revolving around him. Elves are also aloof, proud, arrogant, and uncaring of the lesser races. In their eyes, men are little better than orcs, and often, more than once, men and elves have come to blows. The elves are divided into several people and kindreds. The great ones, known as the High Elves, inhabit the great island continent of Ulthuan, which rests on the great western ocean. The capital of Lothan is the land of Etain, is the hub of elven trade, and the port of the mighty elven armada. From here their fleet plies the waves to dominate trade and explore the world. Finubar, the seafarer, is their ruler, and he is the most cosmopolitan of all the Phoenix kings. He lifted the ancient bans which decreed that no ship save those of an elven fleet may ply the sea for 300 miles outside and around Ulthuan. The city is as far as any non-elf can go. Human traders can taste the pleasures of the most wondrous city of the world. after our beloved Altdorf, of course, and ply their trade in the bazaars and merchant houses of Lothen. But to try and pass the Emerald Gate is to invite a certain and swift death. A 10,000-strong guard keeps vigilance over the city and the citadel of Glittering Tower, the beacon which guides the elven craft through the straits of Lothern. Outside their blessed island, elves are rare nowadays, and getting rarer. Only in the land of Bretonia, amongst the hidden glades of the Loren forest, survive the last kingdom of the wood elves in the old world. The wood elves of Loren are the masters of the bow, and it is said that an elven marksman can hit the eye of a goblin in the dark. Many strange tales are told in the land of Bretonia about the fey elf lords of Loren. Troubadours of Curon sing of the cult of the war dancers, young elves with lethal acrobatic abilities as well as strange and terrible beast masters. Elves who live amongst the wild animals of the forest are these. Tales also tell of elves who sing to the trees and plants, shaping them to form houses and make the path of the forest to misdirect intruders. The most fanciful tales speak of forest spirits, of giant trees that walk like men, but these are probably mere fables. Few men ever venture to the glades of Loren, and few ever still return. When they do, they are found on the boundaries of the Loren forest, their bodies broken and strung on the branches of the trees as warnings to trespassers. Bretonians have learned to fear the fairy folk and leave their woodland kingdom well alone. So, Loren rests, shrouded by mist and magic, brooding and foreboding. Be wary, traveller, and do not venture to the shadow of Loren. For even if you do not lose your life to an elven arrow or sword, you might travel for 300 years amongst the glades, never realizing the time that has passed until you return to your home, and the years take a toll on you like an eye blink. Wood elves live in very few places beside Loren. The Forest of Shadows and Drakwold Forest are said to hold small elven communities still. A man should be wary of these places, for many have died by unseen arrows when they have trespassed into the domain of elves, even without knowing that they had passed their invisible borders. There is said to be a third kingdom of the elves as well, far more sinister than the other two. From across the separating seas came piratical elf raiders, dressed in black, bringing death to the coastal areas with fire and steel. No scholar that I have talked to knows their true origin. Perhaps they live at sea, or come from some ancient other land of the west, past the blessed island of Ulthuan. The lords of Ulthuan say little of these raiders, but warn us to slay them without mercy. They call these black-garbed elves the Dark Elves, and hint at some ancient schism amongst the elves which led to their downfall. It is said that over a millennia ago these Dark Elves sacked the city of Rebus in the land of Tylea, razed it to the ground, and took thousands of prisoners to be carried off to slavery. It is proof of how the race of elves is capable of great cruelty and evil, despite their fair countenance and apparent civility. To me, the elven race remain a fascinating, complex, and dangerous mystery. But I shall rejoice when they are no more, for then all that remains shall be left for man. These are the last days of the elves, and their sun is setting, glorious, blood-red, and ultimately dying.